Hey everybody. In this video, I'm going to show you real quickly a couple of examples of the essays for final projects in the Immigrant Narratives class. These are by students from last semester who did a good job with their essays for the final project. And so I just want to show you a couple of different ways that your own essay could look. Now, in the English class, ENG 095, I've been giving you pretty strict requirements for what you need to do in each of the paragraphs for the persuasive essay or the compare and contrast essay. But in this case, you have a lot more freedom to tell this story in the way that you want to tell it, okay? So I'm not going to give you just one way to do it. It's up to you. But these examples show you a couple of the possibilities that are open to you. Now, the most important things that your essays have to do is they have to include a subject that lets you talk about immigrants, a subject that you're connected to yourself, and a subject that has to do with community. And in addition to that, you need to talk about your subject in terms of the past, before you became involved with the subject, the present, where you are involved with the subject, and your future in connection with the subject. So those are the things that you have to do in your final essay, but you can do them in whatever way or whatever order that you want to. Now I'll go ahead and just show you a couple of examples. So here's one essay, and the subject of this is the Immigrant Learning Center in Malden. Now this person, here I'll read you just a little bit of the beginning. It was a Monday afternoon, November 12th, 2018, and I was heading to work. At the time, I used to work as a dishwasher in a small Haitian restaurant in Malden. As I was passing by, I saw a brown painted building next to the public library with a sign that said, Immigrants Learning Center. Then I decided to go into the building. So the way that he opens this essay is with narrative writing, right? He tells a short narrative about how he first encountered the Immigrant Learning Center and how he walked in and started to learn about it. Okay, so that's the way that he chose to introduce his subject, by some narrative writing. And that does a good job of making the reader a little more interested. It lets you know right away what his own connection to the subject is. And so that's a pretty effective way to open it. He opened it with narrative writing about the first time that he met the subject. And then if we look at his second paragraph, on November 1992, the Immigrant Learning Center opened. That is a nonprofit organization and located in Malden, and since then the institution has been a great place where immigrants like me can find the education they need to succeed later in life. According to Mark R. Carrera, Director of Development, whom I interviewed for this project, Diane Portnoy, now the CEO of the institution, created the school because she herself is an immigrant. So, as you can see in the second paragraph, he went back and gave some of the history of the organization. This is where he's talking about the past. Remember, you have to have the past, the present, and the future. So he interviewed somebody to find information about the past of the Immigrant Learning Center, and then he talks about how it was founded, the person who founded it, and he also gets some information about how it's grown over the years, what challenges it faces, and so on. So he puts in a lot of information that he got from an interview in this paragraph, including the past of the organization, long before he encountered it for the first time. And then let's look at his third paragraph. Joining the ILC in February was the best decision I've made so far this year. Many reasons explain why. Before I got accepted to the Next Step program, I didn't know anything about college. I could barely write a proper email, and worse, I didn't have a driver's license. My teacher, Linda, and my advisor, Jennifer, from day one have decided to help me discover my potential. Linda, for instance, is the first person that has ever taught me how to write a proper email. She also gave me the tools that I need to not only increase my vocabulary skills, but also improve my writing skills. Jennifer, whom I called Jen, was so kind to me that I don't even know how to explain it. And then he talks about all the ways that she helped him, including eventually going to the Bridges to College program uh, at JVS. That was her advice. So, in this paragraph, he's talking more about the present. I mean, technically it's the past, but it's the very recent past, right? It was the same year that he was writing this. So he talks about his own relationship to the Immigrant Learning Center once he was a student there, once he was enrolled in a program. So this is talking about his present in connection with the subject, and it's also talking about community, right? Because these are people whom he was close to and whom he learned from at the Immigrant Learning Center. So this is the paragraph that really is most about community in connection with his subject. And then let's look at this paragraph. Now I'm all set to start college this coming spring. My plan is to go to nursing school, but since getting an acceptance from a nursing school is very competitive, I also have a plan B, which is continuing with the career that I had before I left my home country. Back home, I was a social studies teacher in high school. So this is a paragraph that's about his future, right? You've got to do past, present, and future. The good news is I'm willing to educate myself so in the future I can become a good member, not only for my family, but also for my community. If I become a teacher, I plan to teach English at either the Immigrant Learning Center or JVS. I would also love to be part of the team that I think will help improve the qualities of service the institution is providing. So, he also says, if I become a nurse, as small as it can be, I will always make sure that each year I make a donation to the school. So in this paragraph, he's talking about his own future in connection with the subject, right? In the future, as he pursues his career, he wants to give back to the organization by teaching there or making a small donation. He also talks about how somebody at the organization, Jen, encouraged him to pursue a career, to continue being a teacher. So in this paragraph, he's doing the future in connection with this subject. And then here's his last paragraph. Like every immigrant student, I struggled, but I never gave up. I know how difficult it is to learn a new language. However, when we have the help and resources we need, it gives us a boost to keep pushing forward. In that sense, the Immigrant Learning Center and JVS have been what I've always needed in my life to start my career, and I know I'm not the only one. That is why, besides my personal contributions, I also tend to be an ambassador for this institution, so that wherever I go, I can encourage other students to remember what their main focus is, especially immigrant students like me. So, that paragraph is really just acting as a conclusion where he makes the essay feel finished by reflecting on how important the subject was to his own journey here in the United States. And he talks about how it's helped him and how he wants to continue to represent it going forward and recommend other people use its resources. So this is just one way that you can structure the essay. It lets him talk about his subject in connection to community, in connection to immigrants, of course, and in connection to himself. And he also talks about the past before he became involved with his subject, and his present at the subject when he was a student there, and his future, his plans for the future, and how he'll give back. And he started the whole thing off with some narrative writing about the first time he encountered the place. And then he went into a paragraph where he talked about the organization's origins when it was first founded in 1992 and how it's grown and what challenges it faces. Then he talked about what he got out of it and also the community that he was a part of there, the people who helped him at the Immigrant Learning Center. And then he talked about his future plans, and then he gave it a little conclusion. So that's what he did. Now let's look at another essay really quickly and see how this student organized their essay. Brazilians in the Boston area. So right away, the title tells you what the subject is. The subject of this is the Brazilian community in Boston. Brazilians are everywhere in the United States, especially in the Boston area. If you pay attention around the Boston area, you're probably going to see the combination of green, yellow, and blue. Guess what? A mix of color from a Brazilian flag. The flag from Brazil hangs on the store, restaurant awnings, stickers on windows, front porches, above churches, and even on people's cars. It is not hard to know someone who lives here, and they came from Brazil. And then it talks about why they came here for a better life and how they're hardworking and brave. So this student started her essay in a different way, right? She didn't start with a story about herself. She started with a kind of hook that starting with just the Brazilian flag. And this is a flag that you see in a lot of places around the Boston area. So there's a little bit of descriptive writing, the green, yellow, and blue, and all the different places that you see it. So she uses that to make the reader interested. Hey, yeah, I have seen that flag. Why do you see it so much around here? Well, there are a lot of Brazilians here, and I'm going to talk to you about the Brazilian community in Boston. So she started it in a different way. And let's see what she does in her second paragraph. I am from Brazil, and I was born in 1994 in Minas Gerais. When I was 1 year old, my father decided to come to the United States for a better life and new opportunities. And then she went, when she was young, to the United States with her mother. And then she ended up going back to Brazil when she was 4 years old with her mother. Um, so here she's talking about her own story a little bit when she was a baby and when she was young and she came to the United States. So this was the first time that she was a Brazilian in Boston herself, but it was before she was old enough to even remember that time. So she just explains um, how she first came here, how she went back, and then eventually she ended up coming back. And then this paragraph is about the past of the community, before she was old enough to remember, before she was really involved with the community. Her parents were there. Back in the past, almost everything was different. According to my parents, we did not have Brazilian markets, options for Brazilian foods, clothes from Brazil, Brazilian restaurants, and Brazilian channels on television. It was hard to find anything from Brazil, and the Brazilian community was small. One of the things that my mother said was that the ways to communicate with our family back home were scarce. So this is the paragraph about the past of the community, and you can tell who she's getting her information from, right? She talked to her parents. She said, tell me about what it was like in Boston for Brazilian immigrants back when I was a baby and I can't remember. She talked to her mother. She talked to her stepfather here about how things are different now, and so on. Basically, in the past, Brazilians lived here without our costumes for a long time, and so on. And then we have a paragraph about the present. Nowadays, everything is the opposite of the past. The Boston area has a large number of Brazilians, and sometimes I think that all Brazilians are living here. And she gives examples of all the different Brazilian businesses that there are in the area, famous Brazilian restaurant in Copley Square, and so on. And then in her next paragraph, she explains the importance. This access to bring our outfits and Brazilian stuff make life here easier. It also made Brazilians more involved with our roots. And then she has a paragraph about the future. In the future, I think the Brazilian influence in the US is going to be stronger in so many ways because we have a lot of American Brazilians here. One of the benefits of the Brazilian community growing so fast is that I can feel more at home. I'm so grateful to have an opportunity to live here with my family around me and make all my dreams come true. I have so many goals to achieve in the future. One of the goals that I have is to graduate from college and get a PhD in psychology. I hope that I can help and support my mother and my family as they need it. My family and I are dreaming to buy our own house. Moreover, I would like to be involved with volunteering or helping the Brazilian community and other immigrant communities. So in this paragraph, she talks about the future, and especially her own future, her goals to get a PhD in psychology, to buy their own house, and she wants to volunteer within the Brazilian community. So that's how she chose to organize it. Her last paragraph is a long paragraph about the future, and she makes it feel finished at the end. All things considered, of everything I've done here, oops, and I will still do, the sensation of living here is an ambivalent feeling, by which I mean half of my heart lives here and the other half lives in Brazil. So she reflects on what it means to be an immigrant who's between two different places. So she started with a more general opening, talking about the Brazilian community by how you can see the flag everywhere around Boston. Then she talks about her personal and her family history when they first came to Boston, and then she went back to Brazil. And then she talks about the past and what it was like for Brazilians then, how the community was very small. She got that information by asking her parents questions about that time. And then she talks about how it is now with so many options, how it makes our life easier. And then she talks about the future and her own future in particular in relation to the Brazilian community. So those are just two examples of how you can structure your essay for your final project. You definitely want to begin with something that will make the reader interested, but also introduces the topic, the subject that you're going to be writing about. Okay? But there are lots of different ways to do it. The way you do it is up to you. All right, I hope that that helped, and I'll also email you all uh, copies of these essays so that you can read them yourselves. Thanks for listening.